Colossus is the most advanced lineup optimizer in daily fantasy sports. Lock and exclude players. Adjust player exposure to reduce risk of injury or poor performance. Customize individual projections or upload your own projections. Generate hundreds of optimal lineups in seconds. Name and save the best lineups. Create winning lineups for the top sites like DraftKings and FanDuel for free at dailyfantasycafe.com.
Hello and welcome to the inaugural edition of The Huddle College Football Podcast. We're talking about Saturday's slate. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Spencer Limbach at Spencer_JL, and you're the college football expert here. So we're going to go ahead and run down some of your favorite plays for the Saturday slate. We'll talk about FanDuel first, starting off at quarterback, of course, which is the starting pitcher of football, as it were, since we're still in the tail end of baseball season. Starting off, Joshua Dobbs, $10,100 on FanDuel. He's a guy who finished the season strong, really, really strong at the end of last season, and now starts off the season against Bowling Green. So why don't you give me your take here on Joshua Dobbs?
Yeah, Bowling Green's just one of those terrible defenses from the MAC. It seems like almost every defense from the MAC is pretty horrible, but Bowling Green especially, because they run the hurry up on offense, so that just increases the possessions for the other team against that terrible defense that ranked, I believe, 118th in total defense last year. So Tennessee at home, they're 21-point favorites, which is enough to be confident that they're going to do well offensively, but not enough to really pull the starters if they are, in fact, leading by that much. And Bowling Green, they also have a pretty good offense, as I was saying, so they could hang around in this game within that margin. So that would just further Joshua Dobbs' fantasy totals because he's a dual threat guy who could really just put up the fantasy points on the ground, rushing touchdowns, and through the air. So I really like him. I think he's one of the top overall options here on FanDuel. You're going to have to pay up a little bit, but you always love those dual threat QBs, so I think he is the number one guy.
Yeah, I like that. And then another guy you've got here, Dane Evans. You've got him listed as a potential top-tier quarterback, but not priced like a top-tier quarterback. Another guy in a great matchup. And looks like a close game in this one, 66-point over-under. Tulsa favored by 6 points here against Florida Atlantic. And there's not going to be a single person watching this and worried about the Florida Atlantic defense slowing him down.
Yeah, pretty much. And this game last year was quite the shootout, too. I think Florida Atlantic won that, put up like 50 points. So, I mean, this one's at Tulsa. So, I mean, you have to really like their chances at home against a really bad defense. It's just going to be back and forth. So Dane Evans has a couple of great wide receivers, including one of the best wide receivers in college football. We'll get to him a little later. That's Garrett Lucas. So you like him airing it out. Although also has a good target on the other side in Garrett. He's one of the top picks in the mid-range on FanDuel in this slate, and he's a big wide receiver, 6'5", gets a lot of red zone opportunities. So Dane Evans, he's not going to give you a ton in the rushing department, mostly through the air, but I think he's going to put up a pretty high total on Saturday. So I like him if you need a little bit of savings at quarterback. He's one of those tier 2 options that you can go down to.
Yeah, that's a great call there. Another guy, is this Jock Johnson? I don't want to mispronounce this. Now I'm going to lean on you for this. Jaquez. There we go.
That's the other side of that FAU Tulsa game. Jaquez, he put up, I think, 300-plus yards, 3 touchdowns passing, and then had another rushing touchdown last year against Tulsa. So, like we said before, back-and-forth game, highest total in this slate, or one of the highest totals. You have to like Jaquez, that dual threat ability. He's even cheaper than Dane Evans. So, yeah, I mean, you could argue the case that he's a better play than Dane Evans just because he does have that dual threat ability, and they're going to give him the ball and ask him, hey, keep us in this game. So, yeah, I like him at 8,200. He's a little bit cheaper than guys like Dobbs or Evans.
Yeah, that's a great call. And then moving over here to running back, your top guy here, Paul Perkins, a guy who had a huge season last year, almost 1,600 yards rushing, 9 touchdowns, and he's at $8,500. And it's a game against Virginia, which is kind of similar to the Tennessee game you were talking about, 19-point spread. So you expect big offensive output, but still close enough that you're seeing these guys at least till you figure, mid to late fourth quarter, even if it does get kind of out of hand. So at that price tag, you got to figure that he's got to have ample opportunity to pay out that price tag.
Yeah, I almost like him better than guys like Nick Chubb, who are well above 10,000 on FanDuel. So, yeah, I'll take the savings at 9,400 there with Paul Perkins. So you have to also consider that UCLA is breaking in a new quarterback. I know this guy is very talented, but you have to think that they might keep the leash a little bit close with him and just kind of ride Perkins to make him feel more comfortable. So, yeah, I really like him in this matchup. It's a nice over-under, nice spread where, it's what I like to call the sweet spot where it's just enough where UCLA should be leading, but not enough to actually pull all the starters and put Perkins on the bench. So he should gobble up some yardage in the second half.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. And then next up, Jalen Hurd, another Tennessee guy, and another guy that you've got listed as a potential top tier guy, listed as a tier 2. So you already kind of touched on this one a little bit with the Tennessee game. So obviously Jalen Hurd, if this team's putting up a ton of points, you're going to see some goal line carries. You're going to see plenty of opportunity for him too.
Yeah, and he's another guy who really broke out in the second half of that season, and he's the main workhorse for Tennessee now. 8.3K, even cheaper than Paul Perkins, similar output. So you can argue that he's a better per dollar play. I think you can actually use him with the quarterback, Joshua Dobbs of Tennessee. I know they kind of conflict against each other a little bit for fantasy purposes, but there should be plenty to go around in that game. And I think you can both put them on FanDuel and feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, that's a great call in there. And then your final guy here wasn't the workhorse last year, but now is the workhorse this year. Christian McCaffrey for Stanford, only $7,000, so a nice value for a guy that you expect to get a ton of volume in this matchup.
Yeah, and they're favorite over Northwestern as well, and we all know Stanford, they just like to go with that downhill running game. And his problem last year, he showed some flashes, but he never got consistent carries. So Brian Shaw, head coach of Stanford, said before the season that, hey, McCaffrey's our guy. He tacked on 15 pounds of muscle, and he should be ready to go, being every down back. So I'm going to take Brian Shaw at his word because he's not one to usually go out on a limb and say something like that. He usually keeps things close to the vest and say, yeah, we'll rotate some guys in there. So when he says McCaffrey is our main guy, then, yeah, he's probably their main guy, and I like him to see 25-plus carries on Saturday.
Yeah, that's a great call there. A guy we kind of alluded to a little bit earlier, Kevin Lucas from Tulsa, leading the wide receiver list here, $9,800. And obviously, once again, another one of these ones we expect shootout on both sides. You already mentioned it. So Kevin Lucas, is he another one of those guys that's a good pairing with his quarterback?
Yeah, I think he certainly is. It's a little bit tougher on FanDuel because, there's only one quarterback, and Kevin Lucas is pretty expensive on FanDuel at 9.8K. So it's a little more of a stretch to make that happen. I don't think you necessarily have to, but if you're going that route, certainly making multiple tournament lineups, that's a great combo to have. That's probably one of the better QB wide receiver combos within this slate. So, yeah, him. And then also looking down, as I said before, Garrett of Tulsa is 6.8. That's a little bit cheaper of a wide receiver quarterback combo. And as I said earlier, Garrett has that touchdown upside, being a tall wide receiver that they target in the red zone.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we're going to leave this next guy for our transition over to DraftKings because he's got a nice, a much better price tag there on DraftKings. So we'll skip down to Jordan Westerkamp, value play from Nebraska, just $5,000. And we know that you know Nebraska football, so give us the 411 on Jordan Westerkamp here.
Yeah, coming into the season, Westerkamp was looking to have a breakout as is. Nebraska really didn't throw the ball that much last year. They just leaned on Amir Abdullah. And this season, they're probably going to incorporate a little more of a passing game, especially with Mike Riley as the head coach bringing his system in. So Jordan Westerkamp figured to be the guy, and then their other X-Factor wide receiver, DeMornay Pearson-L, got hurt just a few weeks ago. So he's out for 6 weeks. Westerkamp's going to have to step up and get even more receptions. He's a guy who does it all, catches passes over the middle, catches the deep bomb. I just really like him to get more volume. and he's near minimum salary on both FanDuel. He's only 5K, and DraftKings he's 3.9K. So I think you can slot him in on both sites and feel pretty confident about it. But one more guy. I promise this is my last Nebraska player. I'm not going to go all homer on you guys, but Jamal Turner is kind of the X factor that's going to slide into Pearson L's role. He's not proven. He's very injury prone over the past 2 years. That's why he hasn't really, proven himself at all. But he's a guy we don't really know if he's going to get the targets, but he has the ability. He has the speed. He has the athleticism that Mike Riley likes in his offense. I mean, if you think of Mike Riley's system, you think of guys like Marcus Wheaton, Brandon Cooks from Oregon State. So he likes those slot receivers, and Jamal Turner will be playing in the slot. I kind of like him as a GPP pick, single bullet only.
Yeah, that's a good call there. And then obviously DraftKings got rid of the tight end for this season, so we have only tight ends, a tight end spot, we should say, on FanDuel. And your top guy here, $3,700 Austin Hooper from Stanford. And obviously these are the only guys you're looking at on FanDuel, like we said. So tell me about Austin Hooper.
Yeah, he's been very involved in that Stanford passing attack lately. As we know, Stanford likes to run the double tight ends, downhill running game, and then play action off of that, sending their guys like Hooper down the middle. So, I mean, it's not inconceivable that he'll get a touchdown or at least get about 4 or 5 receptions, which is all you're really looking at for a tight end, which is actually pretty phenomenal for a college tight end, as you're not really expecting much production at all. But the issue comes with his price point at 3.7, might be a little harder to work in, especially if you're paying up for a guy like Dobbs at quarterback. So if that's the case, Hunter Henry is my next option. I actually like him kind of as a similar player to Hooper, but the only issue here is the blowout factor with Arkansas. They're 30-plus point favorites, I believe 33-point favorites against UTEP. So you have to figure they're not going to be throwing it that much. They love to run the ball as is. So you're just basically hoping for the outside chance of, play action inside the 20 and, Hunter Henry's wide open standing there catching a pass, and that'll be all his production for the day. But as you'll come to find in college football fantasy, that's pretty much how it goes with tight end position, is you just plug in a cheapie and hope for the best, and then just pay up elsewhere to your high upside guys. So Hunter Henry, not a bad pick at 2.8K.
All right, there's your tight end breakdown for FanDuel, and then the one other guy we mentioned earlier that's you mentioned him as a better play on DraftKings. He's $5,800 on DraftKings, $75 on FanDuel, and that's DeQuil Williams from Auburn. Obviously, he's a wide receiver there, and he's you said he was in the doghouse earlier this month. So why don't you give me the skinny there? What happened with him?
Yeah, his coach Malzone I guess he had some off the field incidents or something. I don't know. We didn't get full details, but he had him pulled from the depth chart. We didn't even know if he was going to get playing time this season. And then they re-released the updated depth chart, and he's listed as number 1. And Malzone came out and said, yeah, he rectified his wrongdoings. We're good now. Should be all systems go. So you're a little bit concerned that maybe in the back of his mind, Malzone has him on a short leash, and if something comes up, he won't get his full complement of receptions or snaps, that is. But then again, this is one of the more talented receivers in the SEC. Should be a somewhat close game against Louisville. We have Auburn in as a 10-point favorite. So Louisville has a pretty strong defense, especially in their front 7, or at least they did last season. So they can slow down the Auburn rushing attack, make them pass the ball a little more than usual. And Duke Williams, his nickname Duke, by the way, he could be there, to catch balls over the middle, and he has great opportunity of yards after catch.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll kind of give you the rundown of these guys that are much cheaper on DraftKings than they were on FanDuel. Guys, we mentioned Dane Evans at a $2,200 difference from 89 to 67 on DraftKings. Jaquez Johnson, now on the second try on that one, $2,000 less. He's $6,200. Paul Perkins actually a little bit more expensive at 96 compared to 85. Jalen Hurd gets a $1,400 discount down to 69, and then Christian McCaffrey, huge one there. He's only $4,800 on DraftKings there. So
Yeah, and I think DraftKings, Hurd and McCaffrey at those two respective prices. I mean, you get two flex spots there towards the bottom, so I think you can just plug those two guys in and kind of build around that. Really don't have a problem configuring rosters that way. A few other DraftKings specific plays I want to get into. Speaking of Duke Williams, his quarterback, Jeremy Johnson of Auburn, taking the reins this season. Some people actually think he's better than last year's quarterback, Nick Marshall of Auburn. So if that's the case, I mean, Nick Marshall was pretty dang good last season. Johnson, dual threat ability. He likes to run that read option. You can throw it to Duke Williams, get his fantasy points that way. He's only 7K, and I like him as a QB2 on DraftKings over there. Otherwise, looking down, a few other guys on DraftKings that I like is Akeel Lynch. He's on the early slate over there at DraftKings for Penn State. He's only 4,600. Another guy who can fill out your flex spot. He's kind of similar to Paul Perkins and Jalen Hurd, as we said earlier. A guy who really came on towards the end of last season, and now he's the main guy. He's the featured guy there at Penn State. They're a 7-point favorite against Temple, so you have to figure they're just going to try and pound it and hope their defense holds Temple. That's kind of the Penn State way. So I like Akeel Lynch. He's going to get 20-plus carries. He's pretty cheap at 4,600.
Yeah, that's a good call. We like you mentioned, this is an offense that just did not throw the ball until they had to last year. And Christian Hackenberg was just so inconsistent. So we really can't.
Hey, but he's a top NFL prospect. He has a great throwing motion when he does throw it, so you can't deny that.
Yeah, when he actually gets the ball off, we'll say. So he'll have a great
sample size, but hey, it looks good, right?
Yeah, I mean he'll have a great 2-year career with the Browns once they use their first round pick on him.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us. We're gonna have more college football insight to come. Check us out on Twitter at DF Cafe. He's at Spencer_JL, and we'll see you guys next time.